Welcome. Thanks you for joining us. We're very grateful to have Andy Naselli here with us, and I thought we'd talk about words, the making of them and the consuming of them and the spreading of them around. You've recently released a book with Canon, How to Read a Book, and I've got a hermeneutical spiral question for you. How can someone not having read it, read it?
You're not the first person to ask that.
I have no idea how to approach this.
My daughters are in Logos Online School, and their classmates are asking that question. They think they're very clever.
Yes.
You can listen to the audiobook.
There you go.
That's my answer.
This question, Mortimer Adler wrote a book of the same title. I assume that your approach is. How would you describe the distinction between your approach and his?
I just plagiarized him, basically. So, similar title, but that breaks on from there. He is much longer, and he approaches it not with a Christian worldview at all. So he's not trying to give Christian advice, not trying to advise Christian readers. A lot of technical advice he includes is for how to read specific genres. And then he's writing at a time when there's not the plethora of technological options that people have had since the iPhone, which has actually, it's made reading more challenging today. People's attention spans have splintered. They need more guidance and advice. So you take all into account. I think it's, my book is shorter, clearer, more concise, specifically for Christians and applicable to the current day.
Okay, great. So you've written quite a bit. And how do you write? How do you,
one word at a time.
One word at a time. How many spaces?
Only one space between sentences. No typewriters.
How about after a period?
Yeah.
So are you the kind of person that has to clear the decks and clear out 3 months and get all your pencils sharpened and sit down?
I think I'm more like that than you are. So I was talking to some of the other guys today, and it seems like you're able to squeeze in out of every minute of the day, something productive. Like if you have a 2-minute gap, you can take it in an audiobook, or you could read a print book, or maybe even write. I can do that with certain tasks and certain kinds of reading, and writing, but not all. Like I can write a text message or an email like that, but for the deepest kind of writing where there's a sustained argument, I feel more like a locomotive that needs to get going.
Right.
And then once it's going, it's going. But I can't just be at top speed within a few minutes.
And so you write like that? Or that's the ideal?
I do.
Like a writing retreat would appeal to you?
I've had 2 sabbaticals as a professor in which I've written a commentary and a book on predestination. They were very productive, and I loved it.
Right.
But I've written a lot of other books, not on sabbaticals.
Right. But there you'd be looking for like a stretch where you can get up to speed and get in the groove, that sort of thing. Okay. Do you read the same way?
Depends what I'm reading. So there are certain books that are extremely challenging, demanding to follow. Like an example, I read Freedom of the Will recently by Jonathan Edwards.
Yeah.
I don't think I could do that as an audiobook, nor do I think I could just pick up a 60-second section of it and remember, okay, what came before this? I want to be tracking the arguments and remembering the definitions. And he said this. He's building on this. So there's certain kinds of literature. I need more time than just a few minutes at a time. I need like half-hour blocks at least.
Is there any kind of literature where you don't need a volume of haiku, maybe?
Well, I can take in literature I'm familiar with that way. Like if I've heard it before or I've read it before and I'm doing it again because I enjoy it so much or found it profitable, it's easier to do it the second time. But for something that's really rigorous and demanding, my first time through, I'd want at least a half-hour chunk.
So years ago, Neil Postman wrote Amusing Ourselves to Death, and one of his points was typographic man was sort of a long form. He points to the Lincoln-Douglas debates where people would listen to 2 hours of extended debate and they would listen entranced, following the whole thing, as opposed to now where everything is bits and bytes, and but you can communicate a lot with a meme, but you can't do the same thing. I'm taking it, a fan of the long form.
Yes. Short answer.
Yes. I want a long form answer. So, do you think would you describe that as a personality thing, or as a civilizational thing, or a cultural thing? It seems that our whole culture today is an information fragment. It's tons of information, all of it fragmented.
Yes, it's a combination of all that. The example I shared earlier today with Jared Longshore and Joe Rigney is that when I was writing a dissertation in around 2004, I didn't have internet access in my apartment. I didn't have a cell phone, and I would spend 8 to 10 hour stretches reading print books and articles, and that was a normal day. And it was just focused, non-distracted, straight up research and writing. Today, I don't have the muscles to do that as regularly because I am more distracted by, if I finish an hour of demanding reading, I'm tempted to check email or to see if a text message came through. Or
Well, it makes sense to reward yourself.
I guess it's kind of like that. That makes me, I think, less rigorous as a thinker and reader. I mean, there are pros and cons here, but that's one of the changes that has come with technology, I think.
When someone reads and writes the way you do, and you're living in this culture, it's going to seem like an odd question, but does that put you in the position of a dinosaur, or does that put you in the position of a man with sight in the world of the blind?
Hopefully the latter.
I mean, do you have an advantage over people in, I don't know, understanding what's going on?
I feel like I do, because I will be in settings where someone's phone vibrates or there's a ding, and their head just jerks. Their attention is immediately diverted.
Everybody's head jerks. Was that maybe that was mine?
I have turned off all of my notifications except for one. My wife's has a special vibration, and I'll pay attention to hers, but no one else's. Even if you were to call me, I'll get the message and I'll respond later. And that might sound mean, but it is. If I don't do that, I won't be able to focus. So I think I am considered a dinosaur for that.
Here's a dinosaur moment for you. I preach from an iPad, and I didn't know about notifications or turning them off. That's esoteric stuff. And I was preaching at a church that I don't normally preach at, and my family had gone to an early service at Christchurch, where I normally am, and I was at this other church, and then the family was off doing their own thing, and we have family chat things, and somebody was yucking it up, and my iPad started pinging in the pulpit. Ping, ping, ping. I don't know what was going on, and I think it was Nate who said, "Someone needs to teach Dad how to turn off notifications." So there's this. We live in a time where people are chasing the dopamine fix.
Yeah.
But is there any dopamine rewards from sitting in a library with a big fat book?
Yes, but not the kind that you might be thinking. This is instead of the immediate reward you might feel when you take a bite out of a Snickers bar, this is the reward you might feel when you hike up a mountain and take in a vista. So there's a longer, arduous process involved, but the end reward is much better. And the whole process then is actually very, very rewarding.
And so if we can maybe this is on point or veer off slightly, but you're here visiting Moscow from Minneapolis, from the world of Bethlehem, where Christian hedonism is a thing, right? And you guys understand that it's not whether we're going to seek a reward, but it's which reward we seek, or what's the quality of the reward we seek. So someone who's frantically checking their phone is looking for a reward, and someone who has a long afternoon in the library following a sustained argument is also looking for a reward.
The way John Piper would put it is the first kind would be like raking leaves. It's easy. You get a lot of leaves. The second time is more like digging, but you might find gold.
Right. Yeah. Right. And some people might say, but then again, you might not find gold.
Or read better books.
Yeah, read better books.
Yeah.
And to extend that metaphor, we live in a world where the libraries have been explored, and we know where the gold is. Right.
That's right.
There are signs. There are maps.
NSA and Bethlehem College have programs that direct students to the gold.
Right. This is you don't have to. It's not like an empty continent before you, and you're just one solitary person trying to figure out which mountain has the ore in it.
Right.
We know. So do you prefer? What's the ratio? I'm thinking of C.S. Lewis's essay on the reading of old books. What ratio of old books to new books in your queue is there?
Okay, this is going to be embarrassing. It's the opposite of what Lewis recommends. So I think he said for every new book, read at least 2 or 3 old books, something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
I'm the opposite, and the reason is I'm a research professor.
Yeah.
And I need to be aware of all the new stuff as well as the old stuff.
Right.
And then the new stuff comes out faster than the old stuff does.
Yes. And you're teaching classes where students are going to ask you this and that.
And I'm also, since about 2008, 8, around there, I've been leading theological journals at Demelios. Now I'm helping with Books at a Glance. So I get, on average, 5 to 10 new books a day, usually as PDFs. So it takes a lot of processing to just work through those and surveying them, and then among those is figure out which ones I want to spend more time with.
Right. What's the quality like, old versus new? Do you, if you were not constrained by your vocation, where you have to stay current with the new stuff, would you say the old stuff is better, or is there a lot of good new stuff?
There's a lot of good stuff that's new. And for some people, they would do better to read John Piper instead of Jonathan Edwards, for example. Like, it's repackaged in English they can understand, and it would be way too much work for some people to have to arduously go through John Owen or someone like that. So I praise the Lord for teachers, gifts of teachers who help people in the church understand reality. And sermons and new books help with that. That said, the best stuff is usually older.
Right. But needs to, even the stuff that's in English still needs to be mediated or translated.
Yeah. Or both of us have written a lot of books, and we do that because we're trying to repackage what's always been true in ways that are understandable, clear in our context.
Right. My wife wrote a book, Learning Contentment, which was simply a restatement, a reorganization, restatement of Jeremiah Burroughs. And so my wife has taught book studies for women through Jeremiah Burroughs and through Thomas Watson's All Things for Good. But then a lot of modern folks, if you just gave them a Puritan paperback, it's accessible and affordable, but they would die, with what's going on. So, you basically there's gold everywhere. There's gold in the new books, gold in the old ones. What sorts of tools do you use for writing?
So I'll just tell you my process when I'm writing a book. I'll use my predestination book as an example. which Crossway published in January of 2024. Probably decades of exegetical work and theological work and teaching and preaching was behind the initial part of it. Then a couple years before the deadline for the book, I knew it was coming. And as I got closer to it, I prepared a list of books and articles I wanted to consult as I wrote the book. And that got to maybe 600 or 700. So I've got a folder in Zotero, which is a bibliographic manager I use. And then I picked from that list maybe the top 5 to 20 books or articles that I thought would be most helpful. And I read those the most carefully and slowly.
Yeah.
And put everything aside. And then I drafted in a Word document, or I actually use a Google document now because after I draft the book, I can share it with other people. I'll come back to that. Yeah. So I'll draft in a document the rough outline of the book and expand it and work with that. And just, it's like a data dump. It's this first writing where everything I can think of about this, I'm organizing and writing, not looking at any secondary literature, just writing and consulting Bible.
Do you worry about transitions? Do you just...
Everything.
You just dump it?
I dump everything, and I try to organize everything. And then that's the very rough cut that no one ever sees. And then it's stand back, and I'm writing comments all along the way of, I'll check this out, research this, ask about this. And then I'll go back through those first books I read carefully and add footnotes and cite sources and reshape things, and maybe add a chapter or combine chapters or, get the structure right. And at that point, the book is probably 75% written.
Okay.
And then it's backfilling it and enhancing it as I go back and look at all the other literature that I have lined up to read. And one by one, I go through those and update, go through those, update. And
the hundreds, you mean?
Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes I go through those very quickly. But if you see a footnote where I reference 6 sources, I updated that footnote 6 times usually.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is that's a lot of work. And then after that first full draft is done, I share it with a lot of friends, ranging from those who have formal education to none. And I say, give me any feedback you'd like in the Google document, so it's live.
And some of these people don't appreciate how much work you've done.
That's okay. I want the feedback of everyone. I'd rather get it before it's published than after. And in the Google document, you're able to update it synchronously, whatever. As they give the updates, I can update the document, right. So I'm not sending out Word documents in multiple editions. Yeah. And it's like crowdsourcing feedback. It's great.
Okay.
So that's the basic way I work.
Okay. So the surefire method of finding typos and that sort of thing is to
put it in print.
Put it in print
Yes.
and open it at random. If your baby comes back from the printer and you open it up and there.
Oh man, so many times that's happened, and it was something that an editor with good intentions introduced into the book. So, that's always sad.
Many years ago, I submitted an article to a magazine, and I used the word scatological.
It became eschatological.
And the editor changed it to eschatological. Eschatological. What is... That was... Yeah. Don't blame the authors for everything.
I know.
Yeah.
I've learned that.
So, how much online or electronic tools, online tools?
Oh yeah, I'm definitely a modern man here. My library has about 60,000 books and articles in it, and about 1,200 of those are in print.
Okay, so you are a modern man.
It's about half is Logos, and about half is PDFs.
Okay.
I don't like using Kindle because they don't normally include pagination.
Right. For citing and that sort of thing.
Right.
So about half in Logos Bible Software, you've got their whole library.
Not all of it. It's very expensive. I've given them a lot of my money.
And the PDFs would be sent to you by publishers?
A couple ways. Because I've been administrating theological journals, I'm able to get new books as they come for the most part. Not every publisher does it, but most do. And then you might not like this, I will take a physical book and take a knife and slice off the cover and then slice all the pages so they're loose leaf, and I'll run them through a scanner, OCR it, as a PDF. That's optical character recognition, and I'll mark up the PDF. I have done that for hundreds and hundreds of books. And the reason is
Yes, I'm interested in your... Yes, tell me more about this reason.
the value of a PDF to me is more than a print book because I am all over the place. I'm on planes, I'm in the classroom, I'm studying in my office at home, or I'm all over the place, and I want my library with me. And often, usually when I'm teaching, I'm mirroring my MacBook to the screen overhead. So I'm a professor, so I'm constantly teaching. And it's really helpful to be able to pull up the book electronically on the screen and show them this quote. If it's a print book, you can't do that.
Right.
So I know there are pros and cons of having a physical book. There are studies that show you remember better when it's physical. You can remember where it is on the page. I can do that with the PDF, by the way. But I think the pros outweigh the cons there for accessibility.
What do you think about the argument that ebooks are compete with paperbacks and not with hard copy? Do you have?
I don't have the stats. The president of Canon Press is sitting back there, and he probably has them and has an opinion. But my guess is that electronic books don't undercut print books, but help fuel them more. As people are reading, that's going to make them want print books. Often someone recommends a book electronically and then buys 3 copies for their friends in print and gives them away. So.
Yeah. So my reading, I've got a third of the reading I do is hard copy, actual books. A third would be Kindle. So I email the PDFs I get. I email to my Kindle address.
Oh, you like Kindle? Okay.
I like Kindle because I'm not a scholar.
Well, you don't need to cite the page numbers as much.
Right.
And do you use a Kindle app to read it, or do you use
I use my iPad,
Okay.
a Kindle app on my iPad. Okay. And so about a third of the books that I'm reading are hard copy. About a third of them are Kindle. Okay. And a third of them I listen to in my truck in 3-minute increments.
I don't know how you do it in 3-minute increments. I like that, though.
Moscow is small.
I know.
It's a small town. So I hop in I live 5 miles out of town, and that's a good 10-minute stretch. But in town, it's like 2 or 3 minutes between here and there. But after a while, I've just trained myself to be able to turn off. I think it's just gotten used to it, where I can turn off and on. Oh, this is where I am. And I write the same way. So if I can write a section, get interrupted, go away for a half hour, come back, and I've got a 10-minute section, I can just scroll up and look at the previous paragraph and just...
So that's not normal. I don't know anyone like that. So you're either just an unusual creature or you've developed a muscle that most don't even have.
That Adam had before the fall.
Right. What is this thing? So like I asked Joe about this morning, Joe Rigney, and he says when someone interrupts you when you're in your office writing, that you unflustered, just pleasantly look up and talk and then go right back to your work. That's remarkable progressive sanctification. I'm not there yet.
Right.
How do you do that?
Well, it's not. It'd be cool to be able to take some sort of sanctification credit for it, but it's not. I think it's just personality, and it happened. So I made a point when our kids were little. There's a long story behind this, but I found myself pastoring before I was really ready to be a pastor. It was a Jesus People type of church, and it had just been planted, and a year and a half into it, the pastor announced one Sunday that he'd gotten a job in another town, and he was going to be gone the next Sunday, and good luck, everybody. And so I preached the next Sunday, and then I finished my master's in philosophy, and the church grew to a point where I couldn't really get away for seminary or anything like that. And so I resolved, okay, I'm going to have to read like a crazy man. And I was done with school now, so I started reading. But our kids were littles, they were preschool and early elementary school. And we didn't have spacious and my office was in my truck for a number of years.
Okay.
So these were good times. Good times. I would go up to Logos School, teach a class. I'd have 45 minutes, so I'd go out to my pickup truck and sit in the truck and read, and then go back, and just a lot of piecemeal stuff. But when I'd read in the evening, or whenever I had a chance to read at home, I'd made a principled decision that I was, as far as the kids were concerned, I was interruptible. Mm-hmm. So if I'm reading and one of the kids comes and asks me to do something, I'd put the book aside or put it down, and then when it was all clear, I'd resume. And I've just been doing it for a long time, and I'm used to it. And I find that if I'm I wrote in productivity that you just do a little bit a day. So I've written a few books this way of, on average, 100 words a day. So I'd open a file of the book I'm working on, and I look at the number of words, and it's 674 in that chapter, and I say, okay, I can close this file when it's 774, and
I've never thought that way in my life. Interesting.
And so I just, and sometimes a thought occurs to you, and you're going good, and you might get 200 or 300, but I just want to say, I'm working on this book, so if I do 100 words a day, in 10 days, that's 1,000 words. In 20 days, it's 2,000 words. And it's the sort of thing where you could write 100 words in 10 minutes.
Most people can't do that, Doug. So I think you're unusual. Like a normal person needs something to say. They can't just sit down and write words.
You make it sound. So this is something I learned from my father. It was a wonderful truth, and I think it has a lot to do with this. My dad once said, when you run out of things to say, go on to the next verse.
Okay.
All right. So if
exposition he's talking about?
Yeah, exposition. You're preparing a sermon. You've run out of things to say. Well, what's the next verse say? So and this has to do with commentaries or expositional sermons, that sort of thing. But I read that verse. I have something to say, and then after a while, you don't have anything more to say. Well, the Bible's a big book. So just say, moving on to verse 17. And people sometimes, if you learn how to do that, people think you're copious, when actually the Bible is copious. You just go to the next.
Yeah, so that's all true. The part I'm talking about that you're unusual. Do you remember when you did the Christopher Hitchens tour, and then there's a documentary or whatever you call that?
Collision, yeah.
And then John Piper's conference showed that, and then you did an interview with him,
yeah.
And he asked you about, how do you remember all that stuff? And you said that word copious.
Right.
Copiousness.
Right.
That there's a life of reading and writing and conversing. Those three all go together, reading, conversing, and writing, that make a full man, Francis Bacon says. A lifetime of doing that consistently gives you something to say. So you can sit down and have 100 words to pour out because it's already in there with a lifetime of reading, conversing, and writing. Most people aren't like that.
Right, but this is not an anti-method. So I think that the end result is a certain measure of copiousness, but I just dump it in. I'm not all that organized, and
So a lot of editing happens afterwards?
Yes. It's not organized in my head.
Oh, okay.
So what I do is I'm reading. I have very broad interests. I'm always trying to be reading different kinds of books.
I heard stacks of like 20 books, and you'll get like 2 minutes in each one or something.
Yeah. So what I've got books at home, a little rack of books at home, and a small, like 4 or 5 books at the office. And if I get 15 minutes free, I'll just go to that stack and read 2 pages of each one. I've got a page pointer, and read 2 pages, and so one of them, for example, is I'm currently reading through Auden's collected poetry.
Okay, that'll work.
Okay. That bit's in, it's lyric poetry, and that works.
Yeah, poetry, proverbs, yeah.
But also, I've done Augustine's Summa that way. Not Augustine, Aquinas' Summa that way.
That one could work too, because the way he wrote it. He wrote it in bullet points.
Right. And so, and then I just move the page pointer. But I'm just dumping them in, and I don't have a filing system in here. It's all in the Fright Room.
Okay.
It's like.
Do you do that to novels?
What's that?
Do you read novels like that?
Yeah.
2 pages at a time?
Yeah.
That's the wrong genre.
Am I revealing too much?
Would you want someone to read your novels that way?
Well, it'd be better that they do that than not read it at all. So,
Okay.
So I read Moby Dick that way. So I had one of the categories that I wanted to have is what I called a bucket book. And
I just read that one a year ago. I hated it.
Yeah, I was really impressed by it.
That's probably because you appreciate it in ways that I should.
There was an encyclopedia article about whales in there that could have been lost.
When you get to the end, he's like, he made up a bunch of stuff. It's not even all scientific. Okay.
Well, Moby Dick, I was probably in my 60s at the time, and I thought I really ought to have read Moby Dick by this point in my life, and I haven't. And big whacking, great big book. So I just said, okay, I'm going to do a little bit every day.
Okay.
And
See, that's where I put that in the audiobook category.
Yeah.
A story. It's not as demanding.
Yes.
So you would do novels with your eyes too.
Yeah, but it is demanding if it's a Russian novel, because they've got each character has 17 names, and they don't tell you. I read Brothers Karamazov that way too. So I just chip away, and it's not organized, it's not filed, and then when I'm writing, quotes occur to me. Something just floats to the surface. So
That's another way you're not normal. You've got a brain that can remember those kind of things.
well, I can't remember it on call. It's just so. Tolkien was once asked where all of his stuff came from, and this describes what is. He said, "Out of the leaf mold of my mind." So
You got a lot of mold in your mind.
yeah, a lot of leaves. There's a leaf mold. It's compost, and I'm not in control of what occurs to me.
Maybe it's prophecy.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Maybe I'm not as good a cessationist as I think I am. So it is weird. I know that it's weird, and I know that it's odd, but it seems very normal to me. And it's just like, okay, what's going to happen today? What's going to come out today? So and I really, so if I say my only stated goal is to write those 100 words, okay, I'm just going to write 100 words. If halfway through I think, oh, Augustine once said this, then I'll stop and look it up, look it up and drop it in. So oftentimes when I do quote folks, it's because a quote occurs to me that I read sometime, somewhere, somehow.
Do you find that when you're writing, their leaf mold is relatively recent, meaning it's the last 100 books you read as opposed to the last?
No.
It's all of them.
It's Mirkwood.
Okay. Okay.
It's like,
My brain doesn't work that way. I don't know if I could remember what I read in 2009 as well as what I read in 2023.
well, memory is a really strange. Memory is.
I forgot about this. How's it work?
Well, So it's like let's say I'm going somewhere and I think, where did I put my car keys? And I stop, and I look in my brain for where I left my car keys. I'm convinced nobody in the human race knows what they're doing. If I'm looking on my computer, I know how to go to the I go to Dropbox and I go to this, and I can track down I can go down the avenue. But if I'm trying to remember where I parked the car, or trying to remember where I left the car keys, or what's this receipt for, and I'm thinking about it, where am I looking? What am I doing? Well, the whole thing is spiritual. It's not a mechanical thing at all, and some of this is sort of just letting it happen, learning how to let it happen, where things occur to you, and you. So I can be actively trying to remember the car keys, but I can also just have things handed to me. And this is I've mentioned this. I did this with at least a couple of characters in my novels because it happens to me regularly, where there's a point where I'm drifting off to sleep in the evening, or when I'm dozing, waking up. There's like a 20-minute thing where I'm half awake, half asleep, and things occur to me in that moment. And it might be a software problem that I've got, and it's like, oh, try this, or it's like things float to the surface, basically. And so one of the great advantages of living in the era we do is something. Augustine said something about the pirate popping off to Alexander the Great. I know there's their story, but I can find in 30 seconds. I can find where he's said that in City of God, just by looking it up. But it's not. I'm not looking things. I'm not going to, in the first instance, to look up quotes. I've read this somehow, somewhere, sometime in my life. That just floats voluntarily to the surface, and then I hunt it down if I need to get the wording right, or if I'm working with hard-shelled editors who want a footnote.
Those are good editors.
Yeah. Well, circling back around, I've noticed there's an inverse relationship. Looking at Chesterton, for example, who has almost no footnotes. You compare how many footnotes Chesterton uses to how many footnotes he's in. Right? Now, of course, you say, and I know the criticism is going to come back, yeah, well, Chesterton could have used some footnotes because he gets some things wrong, right? He just sort of...
It's like people talking about Francis Schaeffer's broad brushing sometimes.
Yeah. I remember many years ago we had Harold O.J. Brown out here, and this was like 40 years ago.
He would have been working on his book Heresies around then.
He was a good guy. And I remember Francis Schaeffer came up, and he said, yeah, he was a generalist, and he may even use the word a caricaturist. Like he's it's hard to explain, but it's a really adept caricaturist. Could draw a picture of Margaret Thatcher with her nose 2 feet long, and it still looks like her. And you say, how do you do that? Brown said that Francis Schaeffer was like that. He was on the money with regard to his general analysis, but he wasn't fastidious, or his arguments didn't have decimal points. And there are people who write books where everything has a decimal point, and people like me, I'm a generalist also. People like me rely on people like you.
Yeah, I do the decimal points.
Well, I've got big books. The one that you did, with Joel Beakey, forgotten the name of it.
What's it about?
It's about the Puritans.
Oh, I didn't do that one.
No, there's one you had.
Don't worry. Beaky and I have not done a book together, but he has done one with.
Have you done anything with Reformation Heritage?
No.
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 Okay.
But I'll take credit for it if it's a good one.
Yeah, it's great. Well, I've got a big fat book with your name on it.
Okay.
How many big fat books have you
Dictionary on the New Testament.
Yeah,
The old.
there you go.
Okay.
Yes.
That's with Beale and Carson and
Okay.
Glad.
Yes, that's the one.
Okay.
I'm thinking of. So people like you and books like that are invaluable to me, but not. I couldn't in a million years write something like that. It's too orderly.
It's a ton of work.
It's just my brain just doesn't work that way. But and this is another weird thing is I've read a number of dictionaries. We're just a page at a time. I read the American paperback of the American Heritage Dictionary up to the M's, and then it got lost in an office move. So I've got to finish the American Heritage Dictionary.
Just to clarify, I have immense respect for generalists. My wife and I have remarked when we hear you talk about things sometimes is, how does he know about that too? You've read very widely and you're steeped in the scriptures and you put all that together and you have an opinion about just about everything. That's worth interacting with.
And some of that has to do with when I was a kid, we didn't have a television. And so a lot of the formative years, entertainment was reading the encyclopedia.
That's great.
But there's a temptation. Here's an example. Charles Williams says somewhere, no idea where, that encyclopedias are the slums of the mind. So, and there are quotations like that and this is another mental quirk, when someone says something like that or some witticism or some aphorism, I read that and it was memorized the first time I saw it. Right.
It's like your Woodhouse quotes you trade with people.
Yeah.
You read that once and it stuck.
Yeah. She had just enough brains to make a jaybird fly crooked. I read that and it was there forever. Okay. And then our Ambrose Bierce is the same way, the Devil's Dictionary.
I just read through that because of your recommendation.
Yeah. There's some just wonderful things. His definition of rear, noun, the part of the army that is closest to Congress. And I didn't have to say, oh, that's a wonderful thing, I'm going to have to memorize that. It's like certain quotes are sticky, or certain metaphors are sticky, and I've got a sticky brain for things like that.
Yeah.
But so I could never write a dictionary or like a systematic theology in the standard form, but I rely on them and I need them and I read them. So I know that dictionaries are supposed to be reference tools where you look things up, but my main use of dictionaries is to read them cover to.
Another area in which you are not normal.
Yes, I'm having we're discovering. Thank you for this therapy session. I'm discovering many things. I'll tell you the weirdest dictionary I ever read, though. I've read dictionary slang. I've read a Mrs. Burns' Dictionary of Unusual Words. But the weirdest dictionary I ever read was the American Heritage Dictionary of Indo-European Word Roots.
I haven't read that one.
No.
No.
It failed to grip. But but it was really fun because there's this Indo-European civilization. We don't know where they lived or what they were about, or we have no pottery from them. We have nothing about them except what linguists have been able to reverse engineer, work back to the word roots. And one of my the grandkids have called my wife Nana, and that's an Indo-European. It goes back centuries. So you come across something like that and you say, yeah, it's all worthwhile. So, what would you say to? Well, we can bring it in for a landing with this. What would you say to a young college student who's thinking about the ministry or thinking about something that involves the life of the mind, the ministry or the academy or something like that? He's got a decent college education, and he's thinking about not grad school so much as thinking about what he's going to do in terms of personal disciplines, reading regimen, what pace of reading, what quality, what advice would you give someone like that who wants to make something of himself intellectually?
So I'd start with the advice, don't try to, just like with school, try to get a degree to be credentialed to do something very specific, but rather you learn how to talk to fish. So learn how to think and communicate and be an all-around useful person, and then you can do a zillion things, not just one thing. So once you've got that base, you said the person has that base from a good college education, liberal arts education, then I would say don't have in mind, I'm going to read X number of books per year. So most people don't talk this way. I'm a big advocate of not numbering the books you read, because that can suck the joy out of it, make it into a competition, and then you now look at books and you can size them up. Ooh, this one's shorter. Oh, the nice big font and nice line spacing. Like, you're no longer thinking about books the way you should be. Right. Instead, think of books as something to enjoy.
The end of the road there is you're reading Dilbert comic books. The collected works of Dilbert, that counts.
Right. But you're reading to enjoy and to enjoy God, to enjoy His gifts to you, to be better at the vocation He's called you to, and you don't need to be competing with others with a number. So my advice is, given that base of reading is something that should be in your routine, we might be different here too. I don't think so, because I read productivity. Have a schedule where you don't have to ask, am I going to read today? But have a time that you always read. It's like when I wake up, I always read the Bible. I've done that since I was about 14. Right. I can't imagine waking up and not reading the Bible. I never wake up and think, am I going to read the Bible today? It's automatic.
Yeah.
I think reading should be like that as well. Find a time in your day.
It's baked in.
Where that's just, if someone saw your calendar, that's an appointment. Like, you can't schedule a time there. So if that's the case, just like you write 100 words a day, if you read whatever amount it is a day, that adds up over time, and that's super valuable.
Yeah, right. Very good. Thank you so much for an enlightening discussion.
Learned a lot about you.
Yeah. More than perhaps we wanted. Thank you.